Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. Today's story begins on September 2nd, 1864, when a group of citizens surrendered the city of Atlanta to Major General William T. Sherman's army. 5 days later, Sherman opened up a correspondence with the Confederate commander, Lieutenant General John Bell Hood. Both of the gentlemen are pictured here. In his letter, Sherman recommended the evacuation of non-combatants from the conquered city. Sherman's request, well, it rubbed Hood the wrong way and thus began an exchange of rather testy letters, to say the least, over a week-long period. The letters are interesting. They offer insights about how the two men thought about the progress of the war and reveal the deep gulf that existed between the United States and the Confederate States. So let's go through these letters, and we'll start with the first letter written by Sherman. This is on September 7th, 1864, 5 days after the city surrendered. Addressed to General Hood. General, I have deemed it to the interest of the United States that the citizens now residing in Atlanta should remove, those who prefer it to go south and the rest north. For the latter, I can provide food and transportation to points of their election in Tennessee, Kentucky, or further north. For the former, I can provide transportation by cars as far as Rough and Ready and also wagons, but that their removal may be made with as little discomfort as possible. It will be necessary for you to help the families from Rough and Ready to the cars at Lovejoy's, railroad stations. If you consent, I will undertake to remove all the families in Atlanta who prefer to go south to Rough and Ready with all their movable effects, viz., clothing, trunks, reasonable furniture, bedding, etc., with their servants, white and black, with the proviso that no force shall be used towards the blacks one way or another. If they want to go with their masters or mistresses, they may do so. Otherwise, they will be sent away unless they be men, when they may be employed by our quartermaster. Atlanta is no place for families or non-combatants, and I have no desire to send them north if you will assist in conveying them south. If this proposition meets your views, I will consent to a truce in the neighborhood of Rough and Ready, stipulating that any wagons, horses, animals, or persons sent there for the purposes herein stated shall in no manner be harmed or molested. You, in your turn, agreeing that any cars, wagons, or carriages, persons, or animals sent to the same point shall not be interfered with. Each of us might send a guard of, say, 100 men to maintain order and limit the truce to, say, 2 days after a certain time appointed. I've authorized the mayor to choose 2 citizens to convey to you this letter with such documents as the mayor may forward an explanation and shall await your reply. I have the honor to be your obedient servant, W.T. Sherman, Major General Commanding. Well, 2 days later, Sherman gets a response from Hood. General, your letter of yesterday's date, borne by James M. Ball and James R. Crew, citizens of Atlanta, is received. You say therein, I deem it to be to the interest of the United States that the citizens now residing in Atlanta should remove, etc. I do not consider that I have any alternative in this matter. I therefore accept your proposition to declare a truce of 2 days, or such time as may be necessary, to accomplish the purpose mentioned, and shall render all assistance in my power to expedite the transportation of citizens in this direction. I suggest that a staff officer be appointed by you to superintend the removal from the city to Rough and Ready, while I appoint a like officer to control their removal further south. That a guard of 100 men be sent by either party, as you propose, to maintain order at the place, and that the removal begin on Monday next. And now, sir, permit me to say that the unprecedented measure you propose transcends in studied and ingenious cruelty all acts ever before brought to my attention in the dark history of war. In the name of God and humanity, I protest believing that you will find that you are expelling from their homes and firesides the wives and children of a brave people. I am, General, respectfully, your obedient servant, J.B. Hood, General. Well, Sherman replied on September 10th. He writes to Hood, General, I had the honor to acknowledge the receipt of your letter of this date at the hands of Messrs. Ball and Crew, consenting to the arrangements I have proposed to facilitate the removal south of the people of Atlanta who prefer to go in that direction. I enclose you a copy of my orders, which will, I am satisfied, accomplish my purpose perfectly. You style measures proposed unprecedented and appeal to the dark history of war for a parallel as an act of studied and ingenious cruelty. It is not unprecedented, for General Johnston, Joseph E. Johnston, himself very wisely and properly removed the families all the way from Dalton down, and I see no reason why Atlanta should be accepted, nor is it necessary to appeal to the dark history of war when recent and modern examples are so handy. You yourself burned dwelling houses along your parapets, and I've seen today 50 houses that you have rendered uninhabitable because they stood in the way of your forts and men. You defended Atlanta on a line so close to town that every cannon shot and many musket shots from our line of investment that overshot their mark went into the habitations of women and children. General Hardee did the same at Jonesboro, and General Johnston did the same last summer at Jackson, Mississippi. I have not accused you of heartless cruelty, but merely instanced these cases of very recent occurrence and could go on and enumerate hundreds of others and challenge any fair man to judge which of us has the heart of pity for the families of a brave people. I say it is kindness to these families of Atlanta to remove them now at once from scenes that women and children should not be exposed to, and the brave people should scorn to commit their wives and children to the rude barbarians who thus, as you say, violate the laws of war, as illustrated in the pages of its dark history. In the name of common sense, I ask you not to appeal to a just God in such a sacrilegious manner. You who, in the midst of peace and prosperity, have plunged a nation into war, dark and cruel war, who dared and badgered us to battle, insulted our flag, seized our arsenals and forts that were left in the honorable custody of peaceable ordnance sergeants, seized and made prisoners of war the very garrison sent to protect your people against Negroes and Indians long before any overt act was committed by the, to you, hated Lincoln government, tried to force Kentucky and Missouri into rebellion, spite of themselves, falsified the vote of Louisiana, turned loose your privateers to plunder unarmed ships, expelled Union families by the thousands, burned their houses, and declared by an act of your Congress the confiscation of all debts due Northern men for goods had and received. Talk thus to the Marines, but not to me, who have seen these things and who will this day make as much sacrifice for the peace and honor of the South as the best-born Southerner among you. If we must be enemies, let us be men and fight it out as we propose to do, and not deal in such hypocritical appeals to God and humanity. God will judge us in due time, and he will pronounce whether it be more humane to fight with a town full of women and the families of a brave people at our back, or to remove them in time to places of safety among their own friends and people. I am respectfully your obedient servant, W.T. Sherman, Major General Commanding. Well, 2 days later, General Hood responded. He writes to Sherman, General, I have the honor to acknowledge the receipt of your letter of the 9th instant with its enclosure in reference to the women, children, and others whom you have thought proper to expel from the homes in the city of Atlanta. Had you seen proper to let the matter rest there, I would gladly have allowed your letter to close this correspondence, and without your expressing it in words, would have been willing to believe that while the interest of the United States, in your opinion, compelled you to an act of barbarous cruelty, you regretted the necessity, and we would have dropped the subject. But you have chosen to indulge in statements which I feel compelled to notice, at least so far as to signify my dissent, and not allow silence in regard to them to be construed as acquiescence. I see nothing in your communication which induces me to modify the language of condemnation with which I characterize your order. It but strengthens me in the opinion that it stands preeminent in the dark history of war for studied and ingenious cruelty. Your original order was stripped of all pretenses. You announced the edict for the sole reason that it was to the interest of the United States. This alone you offered to us and the civilized world as an all-sufficient reason for disregarding the laws of God and man. You say that General Johnston himself very wisely and properly removed the families all the way from Dalton down. It is due to that gallant soldier and gentleman to say that no act of his distinguished career gives the least color to your unfounded aspersions upon his conduct. He depopulated no villages, nor towns, nor cities, either friendly or hostile. He offered an extended friendly aid to his unfortunate fellow citizens who desired to flee from your fraternal embraces. You are equally unfortunate in your attempt to find a justification for this act of cruelty, either in the defense of Jonesboro by General Hardee or of Atlanta by myself. General Hardee defended the position in front of Jonesboro at the expense of injury to the houses, an ordinary, proper, and justifiable act of war. I defended Atlanta at the same risk and cost. If there was any fault in either case, it was your own in not giving notice, especially in the case of Atlanta, of your purpose to shell the town, which is usual in war among civilized nations. No inhabitant was expelled from his home and fireside by the orders of General Hardee or myself, and therefore your recent order can find no support from the conduct of either of us. I feel no other emotion other than pain in reading that your portion of your letter, which attempts to justify your shelling Atlanta without notice under pretense that I defended Atlanta upon a line so close to town that every cannon shot and many musket balls from your line of investment that overshot their mark went into the habitations of women and children. I made no complaint of your firing into Atlanta in any way you thought proper. I make none now, but there are 100,000 witnesses that you fired into the habitations of women and children for weeks, firing far above and miles beyond my line of defense. I have too good an opinion, founded both upon observation and experience of the skill of your artillerists, to credit the insinuation that they, for several weeks, unintentionally fired too high for my modest field works and slaughtered women and children by accident and want of skill. The residue of your letter is rather discussion. It opens a wide field for the discussion of questions which I do not feel are committed to me. I'm only a general of one of the armies of the Confederate States, charged with military operations in the field under the direction of my superior officers, and I'm not called upon to discuss with you the causes of the present war or the political questions which led to or resulted from it. These grave and important questions have been committed to far abler hands than mine, and I shall only refer to them so far as to repel any unjust conclusion which might be drawn from my silence. You charge my country with daring and badgering you to battle. The truth is, we sent commissioners to you, respectfully offering a peaceful separation before the first gun was fired on either side. You say we insulted your flag. The truth is, we fired upon it and those who fought under it when you came to our doors upon the mission of subjugation. You say we seized upon your forts and arsenals and made prisoners of the garrisons sent to protect us against Indians and Negroes. The truth is, we, by force of arms, drove out insolent intruders and took possession of our own forts and arsenals to resist your claims to dominion over masters, slaves, and Indians, all of whom are to this day, with a unanimity unexampled in the history of the world, warring against your attempts to become their masters. You say that we tried to force Kentucky and Missouri into rebellion in spite of themselves. The truth is, my government, from the beginning of this struggle to this hour, has again and again offered before the whole world to leave it to the unbiased will of these states and all others to determine for themselves whether they will cast their destiny with your government or ours. And your government has resisted this fundamental principle of free institutions with the bayonet and labors daily by force and fraud to fasten its hateful tyranny upon the unfortunate freemen of these states. You say we falsified the vote of Louisiana. The truth is, Louisiana not only separated herself from your government by nearly a unanimous vote of her people, but has vindicated the act upon every battlefield from Gettysburg to the Sabine, and has exhibited an heroic devotion to her decision, which challenges the admiration and respect of every man capable of feeling sympathy for the oppressed or admiration for unarmed valor and heroic valor. You say we turned loose your pirates to plunder your unarmed ships. The truth is, when you robbed us of our part of the Navy, we built and bought a few vessels, hoisted the flag of our country, and swept the seas in defiance of your Navy around the whole circumference of the globe. You say we expelled Union families by thousands. Well, the truth is, not a single family has been expelled from the Confederate States that I am aware of. But on the contrary, the moderation of our government towards traitors has been a fruitful theme of denunciation by its enemies and well-meaning friends of our cause. You say my government, by acts of Congress, has confiscated all debts due Northern men for goods sold and delivered. The truth is, our Congress gave due and ample time to your merchants and traders to depart from our shores with their ships, goods, and effects, and only sequestrated the property of our enemies in retaliation for their acts, declaring us traitors and confiscating our property wherever their power extended, either in their country or our own. Such are your accusations, and such are the facts known of all men to be true. You order into exile the whole population of a city, drive men, women, and children from their homes at the point of the bayonet under the plea that it is to the interest of your government and on the claim that it is an act of kindness to the families of Atlanta. Butler, it's Benjamin Butler, only banished from New Orleans the registered enemies of his government and acknowledged that he did it as a punishment. You issue a sweeping edict covering all the inhabitants of a city and add insult to the injury heaped upon the defenseless by assuming that you have done them a kindness. This you will follow by the assertion that you will make as much sacrifice for the peace and honor of the South as the best born Southerner, and because I characterize what you call a kindness as being real cruelty, you presume to sit in judgment between me and my God, and you decide that my earnest prayer to the Almighty Father to save our women and children from what you call kindness is a sacrilegious, hypocritical appeal. You came into our country with your army, avowedly for the purpose of subjugating free white men, women, and children, and not only intend to rule over them, but you make Negroes your allies and desire to place over us an inferior race, which we have raised from barbarism to its present position, which is the highest ever attained by that race in any country in all time. I must therefore decline to accept your statements in reference to your kindness toward the people of Atlanta and your willingness to sacrifice everything for the peace and honor of the South, and refuse to be governed by your decision in regard to matters between myself, my country, and my God. You say, let us fight it out like men. To this, my reply is, for myself, and I believe for all the true men, I, the women and children of my country, we will fight you to the death. Better die 1,000 deaths than submit to live under you or your government and your Negro allies. Having answered the points forced upon me by your letter of the 9th of September, I close this correspondence with you, and, notwithstanding your comments upon my appeal to God in this cause of humanity, I again humbly and reverently invoke his almighty aid in defense of justice and right. Respectfully, your obedient servant, J.B. Hood, General. Now, there's one more letter coming up. This is Sherman writing on September 14th, 1864, to General Hood. General, Sherman writes, yours of September 12th is received and has been carefully perused. I agree with you that this discussion by two soldiers is out of place and profitless. But you must admit that you began the controversy by characterizing an unofficial act of mine in unfair and improper terms. I reiterate my former answer, and to the only new matter contained in your rejoinder add, we have no Negro allies in this army. Not a single Negro soldier left Chattanooga with this army or is with it now. There are only a few guarding Chattanooga, which General Stedman sent at one time to drive Wheeler, Joseph Wheeler, out of Dalton. I was not bound by the laws of war to give notice of the shelling of Atlanta, a fortified town with magazines, arsenals, foundries, and public stores. You were bound to take notice. See the books. This is the conclusion of our correspondence, which I did not begin and terminate with satisfaction. I am, with respect, your obedient servant, W.T. Sherman, Major General Commanding. So there you have the testy exchange of letters between General John Bell Hood and General William T. Sherman. This is soon after Atlanta was surrendered to Union forces. And you can see buried within this some of the venom that's coming out. They go all the way back to the beginning of the war, the attitudes of war. They talk about race. They talk about Negroes. They talk about Indians. They talk about women and children, non-combatants, the laws of war, humanity, and God. It's a ranging conversation for two soldiers who are really getting to some fairly deep issues, and they both recognize it. And they end the correspondence. I can't imagine that they continued much of a friendship after that exchange. So there you have it, the letters between Hood and Sherman. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.